Greetings, fellow Watford fans. Omar here, and it's time for the Yawns 10-minute take on Rotherham 1, Watford 1 today at the New York ground. I guess it's called the New York Stadium, actually. But it was a draw at the end of the day for a Watford side who, again, started the game on the wrong foot. The defense, again, a problem. It's been a problem for more than just a few games and just a few seasons. The defense in a pickle as early as the second minute of the game, Rotherham getting the goal that put them in front for the home side, the Millers, in the steel towns of Rotherham, there in South Yorkshire. Sheffield, not far away, and a goal not far away. As I said, Rotherham did not waste any time getting on the score sheet with the goal, headed in after the defense was caught napping and ball watching. Cabaselli, the closest defender to it all, and he took a spectator seat as Rotherham took a 1-0 lead. Watford were not good in the first half hour of the first half, and that's been the way they've been in a number of these games this season, and it's a troubling pattern for Watford, starting the games not well at all. If you look back against West Bromwich Albion, the vast majority of that game, Watford were no good in the game. Certainly against Preston early on, Preston in the first half of that game had the lion's share of chances, I'd say. Were very busy. Parts of the game against Birmingham, that was true as well. And Birmingham took the lead in that one. And then the games that we've seen against Middlesbrough, where Watford were not good in the first 20 minutes or so. And we saw what happened against Queen's Park Rangers. The same thing, the same pattern as Queen's Park Rangers scoring the first goal of that game. So Watford have a problem here in terms of the way they start these games. And they've been conceding goals to begin these games, or certainly conceding the first goal of the game in 3 consecutive championship games now. That would worry you a bit if you're a Watford supporter. And of course, we know about the weaknesses of the defense and the issues of defense and how they have been neglected in large part in a lot of these seasons. Definitely now we know that the defense has to be better and not switch off. No matter what personnel you have as your defenders, you have to be able to be engaged and focused for every minute of a game, especially the first couple of minutes of a game. And Watford were entirely switched off at that time. And as I said, Rotherham put more pressure on Watford, as I said they would in the Friday Focus, as they continued to come at Watford in the first half hour of the game and should have scored a second goal pretty quickly after that. Daniel Batman had to make some very good saves to avoid what could have been a 2-0 deficit. Watford were again taking up a lot of pressure from Rotherham. And I said that Rotherham were going to do this. They were going to come out fired up after a defeat against Sunderland. And they did indeed come out like that. And for about half an hour, they dominated and controlled the game. But then at that half hour mark, Watford began to get a foothold in the game as Rotherham began to tire and recede. Watford continued to grow and go forward. João Pedro was a key instigator in this game. I think João Pedro, again, a very good game. He had the best game of any Watford player today, although he didn't score, but he did have a lot to say, both behind and in front of the ball. I thought had a very good game, João Pedro, continuing to grow and mature. And now with the freedom of knowing that he'll be at Vicarage Road for at least January, if not the entire season, he's continuing to show you the leadership qualities that I've always seen him to have. And he's taking the corner kicks, which I think he did pretty well on today overall. But in the 32nd minute, it was Ken Sema, who has been another good and consistent Watford player this season, providing his, I believe, his 3rd assist of the season, as he passed the ball over to Vakun Bio, who caught it on the volley and lashed it into the bottom right-hand corner. I should say the right-hand corner of the net, past the Rotherham goalkeeper, and that was 1-1. That was Watford's equaliser that was well worked and well taken by Bio, his second goal in as many games for Watford. He is beginning to find the scoring touch after his sitters earlier in the season. He's coming along, and strikers' confidence is everything. Once you get that first goal, then the others follow like buses do. And now you're seeing this from Bio. The buses are coming, and the goals are coming as well. 2 in 2 now for Bio to give Watford a share of the spoils in the end of things. But in the second half, as the interval remained at 1-1, the second half came, and Watford started the very same way they began in the first half. And that is particularly troubling as well, because I'm sure Rob Edwards has something to say to the Hornets at halftime. But whatever might have been said, it was not adhered to, because of the first 5 to 10 minutes of that second half, Rotherham came out exactly the same way, fired up, passionate, willing to put a ball in the box, long throws into the box, trying to disrupt the defense, put it under all kinds of pressure. And Rotherham, for all their huffing and puffing in those first 10 minutes of the second half, couldn't get anything going. Watford stood stoutly. The defense improved marginally. I think Courtney House was very good in defense today. He was the only defender in that back line of three who had any real idea about what he was doing, and he was very composed and confident in doing it. And unfortunately, the other two defenders who started this game, that would be Cabaselli and Cathcart, just did not have much of a game to really speak of. There were a couple of key things that Craig Cathcart did in the game, but generally speaking, both he and Cabaselli really are not and should not be your starting defenders on this team. We've talked about that a lot. I've talked about it a lot over the last couple of seasons. The fact of the matter is, we are dealing with a very thin squad still, not enough, at least not enough depth, I should say, in defense. And we saw today how our defensive frailties once again hurt us in the game. But in the second half, Watford started the very same way, which I think Rob Edwards would be surely disappointed about the way Watford started the second half, because again, Rotherham came out fired up, and as I said, put Watford under some pressure in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the second half. Then after that, Watford began to grow into the game again, and this time Watford had the lion's share of the game in the second half. They had a number of forays going forward, a lot of them led by João Pedro. Kayembe got into the mix as well with some forward play, and also Ken Sema, who again I thought was quite good again today, giving Watford a lot more going forward. But the thing is that Watford did not make use of the space that Rotherham was beginning to yield to them in the second half. I think what you saw from Rotherham was a very tired team in the second half, and Watford just could not capitalize on the spacing that was being given to them by Rotherham. I think Watford needed to move the ball faster in the second half and make use of all the width and the space that Rotherham were giving, because Rotherham were content to sit back and sit deeper on a low block and allow Watford to come forward. They were giving up a lot of gaps, and I'm surprised, and rather, I think, a bit disappointed that Watford did not make the most of the spaces and gaps that they had, and they could have moved the ball quicker. They had a number of attackers on the pitch, and I like that Rob Edwards did sub out earlier today in the 60 in the minutes, I guess in the 60-minute mark, or just after that in the 60s in terms of the minutes. Rob made some substitutions I thought were really good. I like the fact that, particularly specifically, that he brought on Keenan Davis in the game, and I thought that that was a good thing. I wasn't, of course, the happiest when Gaspar came on, but Gaspar did not hurt you today, so I don't have any complaints there. And again, Espria not effective today. I don't know if he's going to start the next game. Maybe Rob will change that, and I think that Keenan Davis could get some more action in the next game that gets played. But Espria not very good today in this particular game. Didn't have really much effect on the game at all. Kayembe and Chowdhury, you can tell they are very comfortable in midfield, building a partnership and a chemistry together that, again, I think served them largely well again today. So that's what you're having in the midfield. And Chowdhury is really the holding. And you'll see occasionally in this game, as you did today, that Kayembe will go forward a little bit. And Espria is really the out and out attacking midfielder. But I just don't think he really got himself into the game very much today at all. Gave up, I think, a free kick, or maybe it was someone that might be João Pedro, but I thought that Espria had already also given up a free kick in the game in a very risky area for Watford. But Watford did see it out. There only seemed to be one winner in this game. Was only likely to be one winner in this game in the second half, when Watford began to control the game. I had a number of opportunities. Vakun Bio hit the post with a header, I believe it was, that just sailed onto the post when it looked as if it was going to be 2-1 Watford. It was not to be today. Rotherham held firm, and Watford had chance after chance. Joseph Hungbo came on very late in the game, not early enough for me to really have an effect on the proceedings. He was far too late onto the pitch. I think that's the only substitution that I think Rob should have put on a little earlier. But generally speaking, I think Rob got the subs right today. It was just frustrating to see that Watford did not make the most of the quality that they had when it was on the pitch, despite definitely going for it. Not saying that they didn't. They definitely went for it with a load of chances, created chances, looked very lively. Keenan Davis came on, looked good. Again, he's still rounding into shape, but definitely gave you something, gave you a little bit of contribution, tried to spread the play. He is that kind of player. He will run into the box, he will hold up the ball, he spreads the play around, he runs into space. He's a physical player. He's someone who is always thinking going forwards, forwards, forwards. That's Keenan Davis, and he'll really round into shape in these next few games, and you'll start to see the best of Keenan Davis. So I thought that there was a very attack-minded lineup at that point. He had João Pedro on, Bio on did Rob Edwards, and he had Keenan Davis on with a spree as well. So it was probably more like a four going forward when a spree would join that action. But it was, I think, a very good, aggressive attacking spell for Watford when Keenan Davis came on. I think it was an important contributor, despite the fact they didn't score again in the game. And this is what Watford need to do from the start of these games. Instead of conceding a goal, need to be really pressurizing the opposition's defense and going at it whenever they can. But again, frustrating. But you take the point away from here, and you look at the brighter side of this. And the brighter side is that Watford now in 4 away trips now are undefeated still in the championship. 4 games away from home, and they've got 4 points in total from each of those games. So 1 point apiece, I should say, from each of those games. So if you don't win a game, definitely important not to lose a game. And on the road this season, Watford are unbeaten. And so that is a good thing. You can also look at the fact that Watford have gone to 4 very difficult places to play, and they've managed to get a point from each of those places. West Brom at the Hawthorns, very difficult on any day of the week, and they did not play well in that game, and they got a point out of that. Many of us as Watford supporters were looking at that going, gosh, how did we get a point out of that? But we did. Same thing in the game, of course, against Birmingham. Birmingham took the lead in the game, and we had to come from behind to get a point there at St. Andrews. Always a difficult place to play there. Same thing at Preston, Deepdale, not the easiest place to go to get a win. And Watford got a point there against Preston. And today at the New York Stadium, same thing. Rotherham took the lead, and Watford got a point out of that. So the bottom line is, in all these situations and scenarios, Watford have managed with character to come back or to hold on to a point, and they did so again today. Again, you can't really argue with that at the end of the day. If you're unbeaten away from home, you're obviously doing something right. And Watford, after 8 games, have just 1 defeat. So you've got to look at this in context now. Watford, I think, with, again, still nowhere near where Rob Edwards wants them to be and where he will have them being, I'm sure. And still with a number of players out injured, if you can have 13 points from 8 games in a championship season in a 46-game grind where you've got the likes of a Sheffield United and a Burnley and a Norwich City who keep going from strength to strength, and you've got teams out there like the Queen's Park Rangers who can be very, very good on their day, and you've got a team like a Rotherham or a Preston, you've got teams like this who can on their day really hurt you. Uh, Having 13 points from 8 games and a West Brom side that can hurt you at times, I think that's pretty darn good. Considering everything, considering the fact that we've got all these injuries, you're not going to see Tom Deli Bashiru for a number of months. You've got Raymond I out injured. You've got Tom Cleverley out injured. You've got Loser out injured. You've got a number of other players out injured, Jeremy and Gakia included. There's a number of players that we haven't even seen yet in a Watford shirt. And so once those players get seen and they get some playing time and they start to move into this familiar 3-5-2, we will get to start seeing a Watford that we envision. I think you're probably not going to start to see that kind of Watford until sometime in October. So that's when I think you can really judge this team, and we will see how it looks. But so far, in 8 championship games, just 1 defeat, that's pretty darn good. So I've got no complaints about that. Yes, the game is a game that we should have won today, perhaps against Rotherham. But in all honesty, you can't complain when you get a point away from home, especially after you fall behind. And would I prefer that the defense not concede a goal in the first 3 minutes or the first 2 minutes as they've done in the last 2 games? the first 2 minutes today against Rotherham and then the first 4 minutes on Tuesday against Middlesbrough? Of course I would. I prefer that we don't concede. I would prefer that we actually keep some more clean sheets, but it didn't happen that way in the last couple of games. Hasn't happened in the last 3 or 4 games if you include the Carabao Cup game as well. But the fact of the matter is that you can't complain really, having got a point out of this game. Rotherham are not an easy team to play. I've seen somewhere on social media where someone was saying Rotherham are an easy team. That's just not true. You're not paying attention if you're saying that. I've looked at Rotherham's games. They are not an easy team. And I think if you're saying something like that, you're not paying attention to what Rotherham does. They make it very difficult for you, especially at the New York Stadium. They've not lost there all season long. They've, I think, only lost there once in the last goodness knows how long. They're a very difficult team to break down at home. And yes, 2 seasons ago, Watford won here, but that was a very different Rotherham team. This team, Rotherham, and I said this in the Friday Focus, is a team that can give you a lot of trouble. And in the first half, they certainly did that against Watford. So there's no shame in coming out of Rotherham with a point. No shame whatsoever, especially when Rotherham took the lead. So I don't think that this was an easy team to play. They had their long balls, they had the set pieces. They love to create havoc in the box. They like Burnley in that way. They like these long balls into the box that will really trouble and unsettle defenses. And that is really the bread and butter of Rotherham. They were very, very strong in that first half, the first half hour of it. So, no, Rotherham are not an easy team. I take issue with that all day long. Watford clearly were unsettled, not just the defensive mishap in the first couple of minutes. That first half hour, Rotherham made Watford poor. That the fact is that Watford need to improve their first halves of games. That's been the biggest Achilles heel for me with Watford so far this season, is that their first halves are generally not very good. They've not been able to put together, with the exception of the Birmingham game, where they think they were really good in the first half of that game, and maybe the Sheffield United game as well. Those 2 games are the only 2 games I've seen this season from Watford where they've been good in the first half, or even better than good in the first half. I think that would be definitely true of the Sheffield United game and of the Birmingham game. But outside of those 2 games, Watford have not put together a good first half. They just haven't. You look at the QPR game, you look at the Middlesbrough game, they weren't great for the first 20 minutes or 25 minutes of that first half against Middlesbrough. The QPR game, as I said, not good enough in the first half. Same thing against Preston. They were wobbly in a lot of that first half against Preston. I can go back to the West Brom game, or the whole game they were not good in against West Brom. And then the game, as I say, against Burnley, they had not been good against Burnley for much of the first half of that game, until in the dying seconds of injury time, Tom Cleverley scored in that first half. So again, the thing that Watford need to work on in these games, obviously we know the defense is a liability and a problem. They need to tighten that up. Of course we know that. But Watford have to, as a team, both going forwards and at the back, and of course throughout the pitch, throughout the 3/3 of the pitch, are going to have to be better in the first half of these games, because I think that can be the difference between a point and 3 points. This has been the YouOrns 10-minute take.